Ladies and gentlemen, we have here today William Pope. William is one of the greatest January 6 researchers, as well as a January 6 defendant. And he is famous for uncovering the undercover Capitol Police in action, encouraging protesters to charge the Capitol and helping them up rafters. He found a lot of inside information where police were saying that January 6th was a setup and they themselves were set up. And he's here to help shed light on some of the mysteries of that day. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great William Pope. He is the greatest of all the January 6 researchers. I've met them all. Nothing compares to Will. And so he is also a fellow J6 defendant. So this is our Friends and Felons episode. Welcome, Will.
Well, Brady, I've never been a felon. I was never convicted. I won my case. I'm totally innocent, but I appreciate the flattery there. And yeah, we both fought very hard to remain free, and I'm glad that we can be free today and talking to each other.
Yeah, so neither of us were convicted of felonies, but we were both charged, and then we were just eviscerated in the media as being felonious, and that all proved to be untrue. So, Will, what I kind of first, what I wanted to talk about is a little bit about your experience, because unlike all the other January 6 defenders, defendants, you buckled down and you said, fuck these guys. I am going to investigate this down to the gnat's ass. I am going to find information and I'm going to blow this thing open. And you spent thousands of hours reviewing video, and you're the one guy, and you did it all on your own. You were pro se. You did this with very minor assistance of attorneys. You filed all your own motions and you did it all on your own. What motivated you to take such a unique path?
Well, I mean, I think there were a few things, right? One, I study leadership, and anytime you have a very oppressive regime in America or wherever, you have to have resistance to that. You have to begin to push back, right? And so I knew that the course that we were on, just getting crushed in the courts, was not viable. We had to have a way to fight back, and I felt like reviewing the video was an opportunity to find facts that would be inconvenient to the cases, because the government, they were fighting a battle on paper, and they were making claims that the vulnerability they had was that those claims could not be backed up by facts. So I believe that if I studied the video enough, I could find things that would untangle what they were alleging in both my case and other cases as well. So even before I began to represent myself, I began digging into the video, trying to understand what happened that day, and looking for vulnerabilities in the cases that they were bringing against you and I.
Yeah. So, hey, man, you're probably, of all the J6 guys, I think you were the best fighter tactically, strategically, and you took a route that no one else did. You're extremely aggressive, and you had probably the most wonderful and comical motions of any defendant. You would put a picture of yourself in the Thug Life photo. You told one of the prosecutors that he probably was mad at you because you were better looking than him, and you put in a file. What's going on, man? Were you like were you an abused child? What makes you fight like this, man? Because you did not pull any punches.
Well, you got to fight back. And as you know, a lot of the allegations they were making were just over the top crazy, and you've got to fight back by mocking that, I thought. And yeah, I mean, early on, I kept a low profile. Like the first year, I did what most defendants should do, which is not talk, just keep a low profile, keep your head down. And I tried to get more information. But, eventually it became clear that you got to fight back. And I was quite frankly, miserable keeping a low profile because my nature is to fight back, right? So eventually I decided, you know what? Like, if I'm going to be crushed, let me be crushed in a way where I'm happy with what I'm doing. And that was doing battle with the government in court. But yeah, I tried to have like humorous bits in my motions just to have fun with it. And I think the judge probably enjoyed it and other people enjoyed it as well, but that wasn't the goal. Like, the goal was to win my case. And like, even until the very near the end, I didn't know how my case would end, because I was looking at having trial in December of 2024. But yeah, I kept fighting to the very end. And when you keep fighting and you buy more time, you buy more opportunity. And I tried to use those opportunities to make it more inconvenient for the government.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about your case before we get into some of the things that you uncovered. So as it got down, so first of all, you fought for years, tooth and nail. It came all the way down to you were going to go to trial, and Trump had already been elected. There was talks of pardons, but they had a particular bone to pick with you because you had called them out on how outrageous this was, and you made a mockery of them very effectively and to the enjoyment of everyone that was watching. But when it got down to the very end, there was something about your case. There was some people that you wanted to have testify. There were some people that you wanted to bring a light to that the government was very reluctant to allow. And so what was it at the end that you think gave you that little advantage, that gave you that little extra time?
I think there were a few different things. And of course, my original trial date had been set for July of 2024. But then the Fisher ruling came down, which threw out the obstruction charge, and the government wanted to have a little bit more time to figure that out. And so the next date available on my judge's calendar wasn't until December. So there were a few things weighing in my favor. One, my judge had expressed openness in another case to potentially continuing things into the next administration. That way, because he could kind of see the writing on the wall that these cases were going to be done away with. And he didn't want to waste his time. The other thing, there were definitely inconvenient facts that I brought up that would have been difficult for the government, and also might have been difficult for my judge. Like, he had already made rulings in my brother's case, and I had a couple pending motions that he had not yet ruled on. And so he was going to have to do a little bit of work, and it would be difficult, and potentially it would reflect poorly on the judgment he made in my brother's case. So I think that might have played a factor. Again, I'm not inside the mind of my judge, but also the fact that my case was going to be, or my trial was going to begin right after Thanksgiving. So like, I think he maybe wanted a little bit longer holiday, and I made that point as well. But the government was not happy that I got that continuation. He granted my continuation, and they fought back against it, and he shut them down right there during the hearing. And it was the most beautiful thing to watch, because my prosecutor was about to have an aneurysm right there on the Zoom call. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. And because nobody had gotten a continuation at that point, there were a few journalists sitting in the courtroom watching it all unfold, and they reported on it as well. But of course, I was having the hearing over Zoom from here in Topeka, Kansas. But yeah, it made news because nobody had gotten a continuation at that point. And ultimately, it resulted in me winning my case because they never were able to take me to trial. And as you know, the jury is very tough. That's like the one difficult thing. Like, had we had a fair jury, I think a lot of people would have gone to trial. A lot more people would have gone to trial. But that was the one wild card that was very difficult for anyone to overcome. Part of me wishes that I could have gone to trial and raised a few important points of evidence and cross-examined some of these witnesses. to get it on the record for historical value, but ultimately the goal is to win. And I took the automatic win and motion to continue, and it worked out. So,
now let's kind of weave this together, because I want to talk about January 6th in general. Then I want to talk about some of the specifics in your case that probably affected the general narrative. So let's talk about what happened leading up to January 6th and the potential people that were provoking and encouraging individuals to come to the Capitol that day. So let's talk a little bit about some of the fascinating information that you uncovered involving a group known as the Light Brigade. What was happening, and what kind of were they laying the groundwork for people to come and for people to take an aggressive posture?
Well, we have a lot of good questions, right? So there were what I would call preachers who were outside of the Capitol on January 6th, on the east side of the Capitol, and they were basically preaching that people should tear down the gates and go into the Capitol and into the rotunda. And that caught my eye because, I've attended a lot of church in my life, and it didn't come off as like an authentic, normal,
sincere
sermon that anyone would preach, right? And so to me, that seemed like they were provocateurs. But you don't really know until you dig into it, right? You can look at people in the crowd and be like, oh, they're Antifa or whatever, but you don't know until you actually find out who they are and do a little bit more research. So I did do more research, though, and I dug into them, and they ended up being like a network of religious type people located all over the country. And a lot of them claim to have been working for the Defense Intelligence Agency or the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center or other federal agencies and having federal security clearances. And to me, that raised a red flag. And what they did is they would do provocative activities and do kind of like cultural clashes, whether it be, at gay pride parades or abortion clinics or whatever. They tried to create cultural confrontations. So to me, it just seemed like, first of all, what are the odds that you have a religious group that does this kind of stuff where a high percentage of them claim to be connected to federal intelligence agencies? And then the other thing you had, like in mid-December, they were promoting a video done by a guy named Sam Andrews, who claimed to be, back in the day, he claimed during Ferguson that he'd worked for a federal 3-letter agency overseas. And so this guy was saying we should have 500,000 men who are armed coming to the Capitol on January 6th.
Where did he say that?
On the Hagmann report. So
it was a podcast that he put on the air before January 6th with this encouragement.
Correct. And you even have a Senate report, an after-action report on January 6th that notes that Sam Andrews was pointing people to the Capitol in mid-December, and that was on the Capitol Police radar in mid-December. And from video, we know he showed up at the Peace Circle about 20 or 30 minutes before Ray Epps got there. And he had a little group of guys who were there, and they kind of did a march all the way around the Capitol. Eventually, they came onto Capitol grounds, and they were broadcasting live to the Hagmann report on January 6th. And Doug Hagmann told them on air, breach the chambers. And Doug Hagmann claimed that he had at least 140 people inside and around the Capitol that day. And again, like Doug Hagmann in the past has claimed to be an FBI operational asset. And other people with Doug Hagmann have claimed to work for DOJ, DHS. So again, like maybe I should be wearing a tinfoil hat, but I'm not the one who made the claims that these people worked with federal intelligence agencies. They're the ones who claimed it, and they were the ones provoking people to go to the Capitol on January 6th. So I feel like it's fair to ask whether they were connected to the government that day, whether they were working on behalf of the government.
So I see, you showed me a video once where they were broadcasting on the Hagmann report, and they had an individual that was inside the Capitol broadcasting live that day. Is that correct?
Well, they showed. I'm not sure if the clip came from an individual connected to.
Well, he called. He called in.
They were showing. Yeah. So there were a couple things that they were showing. One, they had some clips that they pulled off the internet of people inside the Capitol. I'm not sure if that came from one of their people or if they were just pulling clips off the internet, right? But they did have people on the grounds of the Capitol, including Sam Andrews, Matt Siskevich, and other individuals who I've identified that were there and broadcasting live to their show. And, Doug Hagmann told them to breach the chambers and to take Nancy Pelosi's gavel and to do all these things. So again, like, they've never been arrested, right? And you would think with the noted desire the government had to go after the
people that set it up.
Yeah, the people who set it up. Like, why didn't they go after them? Why didn't these people get attention when they had, they claimed connections to have intelligence agencies? Wouldn't you want, like, are these people infiltrating your intelligence agencies? Do you want to get them out? Or were they working on behalf of your intelligence agencies to set up Americans on January 6th?
Hey, could you turn up his audio, please? Thank you. So when we get to January 6th, the day of, there were numerous people that, including these individuals, that were provoking people. There were numerous people that were breaching police lines or directing traffic, encouraging protesters to go to specific parts of the Capitol. How prevalent was this? And then of the people that were doing it, did you frequently find people that did not end up appearing on the most wanted list and did not get arrested?
Yeah. So, I mean, throughout the Capitol, first of all, you had people on the perimeter of the Capitol grounds. You had people, like, even at the Ellipse earlier the day, you had Ray Epps, you had Megan Paradise, you had other individuals who were going throughout the crowd telling people to go to the Capitol after the president was done speaking. Then when people got to the Capitol, there were people all around the perimeter and at the entryways pointing them to move forward. Many were using bullhorns telling them to move forward. And inside the Capitol, you had a lot of them, like, directing people to go toward the chambers. So it definitely was prevalent. And you got to wonder, like, why were these individuals staying there and directing traffic rather than going to the place they were telling other people to go, right? Now, I do want to make clear that, like, some of those people have been arrested, right? And, I think there is a question remaining whether the government might have arrested some of their own people to cover up their tracks. Very possible. But a few of them were arrested that were directing traffic, but there were, an unusual amount, like more than just to be an accident, right? Like, I've never run like a statistical simulation on it, but you can kind of gauge just from watching video, like, it's not mere chance that people in one area are using identical tactics to people in another area when, we can't tell, like, they ever met each other, right? It's very weird. So yeah, there were people directing traffic, and I don't think we have all the answers to that yet, but we should be looking into that.
You've spent so much time researching this, and what are some of the bigger questions that you have? What after seeing all this footage and investigating the backgrounds of all these individuals, what are some of the most pressing questions in your mind that aggravate you, that you want answers to?
Well, definitely, we talked about Sam Andrews, Doug Hagmann, and others related to them. Like, I think a question is, why is Congress not looking up into that? Because I've sent that information to people like that. It should be on their radar. These people were claiming to be connected to intelligence agencies, and yet why is our Congress ignoring it right now? So that, to me, is a big question. Another question would be, I found the video of the clapping FBI agent in the crowd. So former FBI liaison to Capitol Police, John Guandolo, was on the east side of the Capitol, and he was there with two active duty FBI agents. And one of those agents was clapping as people were going up the steps to the Capitol after they pushed past the police line and went up the steps to the Capitol. And he said, "Oh man, this is going to be huge," right? And then another one with him, Baker Dowdy, with the FBI Washington field office. He went up to the uniformed FBI SWAT team when they arrived. Now, Baker Dowdy was in plain clothes with John Guandolo, but he walked up to the uniformed FBI SWAT team after they arrived, and he knew they were going to get there before they got there because he began going to that location before they even got to it. And he met with them for about 5 minutes. So we know they were in communication prior to the SWAT team arriving. And then, there was a 302 in discovery that listed people that were the FBI SWAT team that was on the raid of defendant Phi Duong, however you say his name. And Baker Dowdy was one of them who was on that SWAT team. So you have a guy who was in plain clothes at the Capitol, and if he was off duty that day, and he was in what the government alleges to be the restricted area, shouldn't he be a defendant as well? And yet he is raiding people for the exact same thing that he did. So clearly we know the FBI had undercovers at the Capitol. John Guandolo said in video that the two FBI agents he was with, Dowdy and the clapping FBI agent, later introduced him to other FBI agents in the crowd. We don't know how many yet. Another question, a big question in my mind, is why is Kash Patel not giving us that information yet? Like, why are they trying to hide it? And we do know that there were at least 17 FBI informants who were at the Capitol that day. And we haven't been given any more information about that, but that came out in an OIG report. And we don't have the details on that yet. And you would think that a transparent FBI would be giving that to you, especially since their reputation is so terrible right now, and they're trying to gain back the trust of the public.
And so now the FBI has stated that there were 274 plainclothes individuals there for crowd control. We have not seen any identification of these individuals, and we haven't been able to track their movements and behavior through the video to see if they were encouraging. But they've stated this number, but as you were telling me, these 274, that might still be the tip of the iceberg, because those agents were just from the Washington field office. And we don't know if there were other field offices that were participating on the grounds that day. Is that correct?
Correct. So recently we had that document that came out and the reporting about the 274. And I think actually they also had other FBI staff that went to the Capitol as well. I think it was about 363 total, and that number included, but not all of them were agents, right? So you had about 363 FBI from the Washington field office only that went to the Capitol on January 6th. And we do know a few of them from video, right? We know the FBI SWAT team that arrived, where you had maybe about a dozen people, or maybe a dozen and a half. And then later in the night, when they were pushing people off Capitol grounds, there were a bunch of FBI investigators that showed up wearing, FBI marked clothing. And I would think that they would be in that number as well. But we don't know like how many were in plain clothes in the crowd. Now, would Baker Dowdy and the clapping FBI agent count in that number? We don't know, because Kash Patel hasn't given us the specific information on what each of these agents were doing yet. But we do know that that number, the 274 or the 363, if you include people who weren't agents, they only came from the Washington field office. That didn't include FBI from Philadelphia or New York or Denver or wherever. And we know from charging documents that there were several agents or FBI JTTF who swore in the charging document that they were on duty on January 6th, inferring that they were on duty at the Capitol. And many of them came from places like Philadelphia or New York or wherever. So we don't have really yet the full understanding of how many were there, where they came from, what they were doing. And I think there were probably a lot more than the 17 informants as well from the OIG report, because that was just, the OIG acknowledged that was just the 17 that they were aware of. So yeah, we're getting a little bit of information here and there, but the FBI hasn't done anything near what they should do, come clean on how many were actually there at the Capitol and what they were doing.
And so we just mentioned that these were just the individuals from the Washington field office. So you have this 274, this 360 number from there. But we don't know what other field officers were involved. And we don't know what other agencies were involved. We know that there were some DEA agents that you discovered that were coming to the Capitol. We don't know how many DHS employees were there. And then we also don't know the actions of the Metropolitan and the Capitol Police. And we wouldn't have known that there were undercover Capitol Police encouraging rioters if it wasn't for you. So we have these multiple other agencies that were that we believe were involved, and we know were involved to some degree, but Kash Patel, the government, has not given us any transparency into the behavior of these individuals on that day. But we can focus on the Capitol Police, and there was some behavior on their part that was particularly egregious that you uncovered and went viral. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Like what behavior?
The go video, where they were the undercover police were helping people up the rafters.
Okay. Yeah, and that wasn't actually Capitol Police. That was Metropolitan PD from the District of Columbia. There were a few videos turned over in discovery that were recorded by Undercover MPD who were in the crowd. And, I've done reporting on that. You had Detective Leyva, Detective Callahan, Officer Tomasula. They were together in the crowd. And at one point, Tomasula was trying to go up the stairs where people were going up onto the upper terrace. And, he was telling people to go and keep moving, and repeatedly doing this. So encouraging people to go up the stairs toward the Capitol. And in fact, we found you in his video where, you were kind of in that area at the time. So, yeah, I mean, there were I think he was very close to Ethan Nordine, one of the Proud Boys, when he was going up there. There were other officers from MPD that were in the crowd, Ryan Rowe. There was a group of them that showed up and were kind of on an upper level of the Capitol and filming down. Those aren't as much of a secret. You had Capitol Police that were undercover. We know that from the discovery as well.
The electronic surveillance unit, and then where's that Metropolitan which you identified as having the bracelets and things like that?
Yeah, that was they were DC Metropolitan Police, so the electronic surveillance unit, and the MPD. They also had an intel unit that was in the crowd at the Capitol. One of the officers who was on that unit, kind of the head of that unit, Lieutenant Lamond, he was on the grounds of the Capitol for hours that day. But he was going to be called as a witness in the Proud Boys trial, and the government wanted to prevent that because he'd been in communication with Enrique Tarrio on the Proud Boy movements, and so the government ended up arresting him. And from what I understand, he reported to prison not too long ago. So it would be interesting to get his perspective because he was heading MPD Intel, and they did have a lot of other people on the grounds at the Capitol. And I kind of wonder if he didn't know that there were other operatives in the crowd that day just from having worked with them, via cross-agency cooperation before, Um, we also found that video of undercover DEA walking away from the ellipse area during President Trump's speech, kind of heading toward the Capitol. I think there were 4 of them that flashed their badges when they got pulled over by MPD bicycle police who thought they were armed, and they were armed, but they they produced a badge showing that they were federal agents. So, and then I mean, there have been other things that have come out, like I think the FBI released a FOIA where there were CIA dog teams that responded after the pipe bomb information came out, and you kind of wonder if maybe they were releasing that to give a hint that maybe the CIA was involved a little bit. And I've heard rumblings that Sam Andrews might have been CIA back in the day. So you kind of wonder.
And so, apart from the undercover agents of whatever various departments, you also found some really enlightening information from the perspective of just the regular patrol officers. In particular, I know on the upper terrace, you uncovered a video of one of the officers, and this went extremely viral. One of the officers said that they were set up that day, that police command had put them in a position that they were overrun, and he was very upset about it. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, and they were reacting in the heat of the moment. And you got to realize each individual officer, just like each protester who was there that day, they had a single perspective of what was going on. And we're trying to make sense of information as it happened. But, they could tell like this wasn't how they would normally operate, right? And he was conveying a frustration because of that. There's another body cam from an MPD bike unit, and he's like, man, we really screwed everything up here, and he blamed it on Glover, their guy in charge. You also have MPD responding to the Capitol, and they look out, they're walking around the Capitol trying to get to a place where they can join the line, and they're looking out and like, why didn't they have any fencing up if they knew all these people were going to be here? Like, people are coming here and they have no way of knowing that they shouldn't be on Capitol grounds. Like, and when I arrived, I didn't know that, because every time I'd been to the Capitol before, like, you were allowed to go on Capitol grounds right up to the Capitol. And, that officer was making that assessment in real time, recorded on his body cam. So, there were, we learned a lot from studying the body cam, and just kind of, part of the problem, you can't like Monday morning quarterback everything. And the police, they had a job they were doing that day, and protesters believed they had a right to be there and exercise their First Amendment rights. But, like the one instance where you walked in to the Capitol from that door on the upper terrace, and police were just kind of standing back, even pushing the door open for you. And on the outside, on the outer terrace, there was a line of police just standing there, watching you go into the Capitol, and they weren't doing anything to stop you. And, they stood back for like 10 or 12 minutes and let hundreds of people into the building. And people looked at that and thought, oh, the police don't even care, right? So you got to realize different people had different perspectives, and you can't just read it from your singular perspective that, oh, they shouldn't have been there, or, oh, the police should have done it a different way. Like, everybody was processing information in real time. And it ended up how it is, and maybe we can learn from it. But yeah, I think people should be a little bit slower to point the finger of blame.
I want to know who gave the order at the Upper West Terrace to stand back and or to allow the protesters in. At some point, someone had to make a decision. Was it an officer on the ground? Was it police command? And there's other video of officers saying, "Let him take it," or "I can't believe we let him in." So I would like to get answers on who made that call. And why is it that we do not have, I mean, apart from maybe COVID, this is the biggest, if it's a conspiracy, it's the biggest conspiracy in American history. And it's very alarming that there isn't a giant push to get to the bottom of it. Because if it was about political authority and you could make this narrative crumble, you could greatly defeat the leadership of the Democratic Party if you could prove their involvement, right? So why is it that, what's your guess as to why on the conservative side that we don't have a great push to get these answers? Is it that, I mean, we could put our tinfoil hats and say that maybe there was some participation on the Republican leadership, or we might just think that they don't have the political courage and just don't want the heat on themselves. Do you have any insight from you? I mean, I know you've talked to lots of congressmen and lots of people in Washington. What's your feel?
Yeah, I try not to make a conclusion if I have information on it, right? It is good to let your brain kind of be imaginative and try to explore possibilities where you might not have the information. And sometimes that'll help you find information, but I try not to make it a conclusion unless I actually have the facts. But what we do know from the book written by Chief Sund, the chief of Capitol Police on January 6th, is that both the House Senate Sergeant of Arms, or the House Sergeant of Arms and the Senate Sergeant of Arms, are holding him back from bringing in the National Guard, right? And one of them at the time was controlled by Mitch McConnell, and one was controlled by Nancy Pelosi. So both the Democrat and Republican politicians at the Capitol played a role in holding back the National Guard. We also know from Chief Sund's book that Mitch McConnell wanted to leave the East Plaza entirely open. He didn't want there to be a bunch of bike racks out there, which would have left, at least the Senate side of the Capitol completely open. And, maybe, I don't know what his reasoning would have been, but you kind of wonder about that. But again, like, we don't have all the information, but you're right. Like, why are Republicans not looking at that and seeing an opportunity
for political capital? Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe they will. I think, to me, so far, they've been more interested in fighting back at like the Democrats' January 6th committee, right? And they were not happy with a few things that they did. But they're more interested in scoring political wins rather than actually
getting to the meat. I mean, that is like, that part is like if there was horse and rabbit stew. Like that's the rabbit is the least consequential ingredient, right? You're not even going to be able to taste it, but that's what they're after. They're after the least important facts, not the contributing factors. They want to talk about the people that smeared others. They don't want to talk about the actual provocateurs and protagonists of the story. Would you talk a little bit about Yogananda Pittman and her actions that day?
Yeah, and I don't have quite the grasp on it that some people have. I know Tarek Johnson has told me a little bit about Yogananda Pittman and some of the other people. She was a deputy chief, I believe, of Capitol Police, and then also under her fell like Capitol Police Intelligence and a few other things like that. And I know both Chief Sund and Tarek Johnson have implied like maybe there was a faction within Capitol Police that was sabotaging the frontline people of Capitol Police, right? And, I had a few interactions on January 6th with officers on the ground. Like, I thought it was a normal protest at first, right? And, like, I don't think a lot of the frontline officers who I interacted with really were involved in any conspiracy to entrap people.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think they were reacting to what was going on, and I think to a degree they were following orders if it were to fall back or whatnot. I don't pin the blame on them at all, right? Now, maybe a few of them did things that they shouldn't have done. Maybe they used excessive force or whatever, but I think a lot of them were caught in a trap like we were, and I don't pin the blame on them. But people who claim to know more than I do, like Chief Sund and Tarek Johnson and others, have implied that there was a faction of Capitol Police that was sabotaging what they were doing that day. And you kind of got to wonder, like, what was involved in that, and was there a faction of Capitol Police that was coordinating with other agencies to do that?
And it was also kind of fascinating to me that after Yogananda Pittman left her position at the Capitol Police, that then she was given a cherry job. She became the chief of of police at Berkeley, which it's kind of interesting because you can't imagine a more maybe liberal district or department than Berkeley. And from what I understand, that was a very financially beneficial position to her. But if things were fair, we would have all these individuals in a congressional hearing and we would get the answers from them. I would just love to see how many times people plead the fifth. That I think that alone would be maybe not incriminating in a court of law, but incriminating in the court of public opinion. It's so interesting that we had so many people, so many defendants. You had 1,500 defendants that had to go through this process, and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars spent on January 6th. But there has been very little effort to get these individuals that were in these positions of power to come forward in front of Congress and explain what happened and what they did that day. I would very much like to hear from Yogananda Pittman and Chief Sun. So now there is a new January 6th committee that, to your point, it sounds like they just want to besmirch the people that besmirched them. But what would you, if you were king, how would you go forward with an investigation into January 6th?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they'll do something. Like, I don't know everything that they're involved with, but I can kind of, just by what they're publicly saying, I can kind of understand like what they don't know or what they're not aware of. And, to some respect, it feels like they kind of have no clue what they're doing, right? And hopefully that's not true, but I have heard like they do have a few leads that they're pursuing, and I hope those are fruitful for them. But it was about a week and a half ago, I tweeted out to Twitter from Denver Riggleman's book. He was a member, he was on the staff of the January 6th cover-up committee, right? The Democrat committee. And, he was talking about the methodology that they used, where they would subpoena phone communications from defendants and from Trump and from Trump's staff and from congressmen. And they created a giant network map of all these communications where they interacted. So if you had a text or call with a congressman or whatever, like they had a giant map of these communications that they put together on a military grade computer. And they were trying to, unravel all of that, right? Which is kind of, that's kind of an invasion of privacy. And it definitely, if you're involving your fellow congressmen and exploiting that for a political gain. But I tweeted about that and, copied Loudermilk in it, like, hey, have you guys got that data yet? Because they claim a lot of data was destroyed or wasn't turned over to them after that committee ended. And, he didn't respond. But a week later, the news comes out that, oh, hey, the Democrats had a giant network map of all the communications, and they quote from Denver Riggleman's book. So I think that did maybe raise their attention to that. Now they're looking into it and whether there was any illegal things done and involved in that. But I don't know everything that they're involved in and what they're looking at. I do think that if I were chairing the committee, I would want answers about any of these individuals who claim to be connected to federal agencies. And I would want answers about provocateurs, like were there provocateurs setting it up? Anyone who was at the Capitol that day who had a security clearance, if they were in the crowd, like I want answers about that. There are a couple things that, I'm aware of that I haven't had time to like fully dig into yet, but so I don't want to go public about that right now, but I mean, there are a couple of things that I know would be opportunities for them that I think they could unravel it pretty quickly if they actually put the time into it. But I don't know. We'll see what they do. They took them a long time to launch the committee, and now they've only got about a little over a year left until a new Congress will come in. And if the Democrats take control, then they're not going to have the committee anymore. So hopefully they get moving pretty quickly.
So I'd like kind of walk people through. So you and I, years ago, I don't know if it was, I think it was in 22 when we started working, and you and I were, from my knowledge, we were a couple of the very first defendants to approach Congress, and we went to Washington, and you had developed some of these questions backed by video evidence, and we approached, what was the guy's name? Elliot? What was his?
Oh yeah, Elliot. Yeah, he worked for Loudermilk on his House Admin Committee.
And so we approached him, and we went to the Capitol, and you showed evidence of people breaching lines, people making claims that they were they had previous relationships or employment from the intelligence agencies, and those same individuals that you mentioned before, saying that they wanted to bring 500,000 people to the Capitol, come armed. We're broadcasting from the Capitol. We showed this, and it was the I don't know, it was his chief of staff or something like this, and his response was, "How can you even identify these people?" His response was that we couldn't prove the identity of the individuals in the video, even though there were 302s. There was an extreme reluctance. And hey, who was the Speaker of the House before Mike Johnson?
McCarthy.
Yeah, and so I think he was working with McCarthy, but there was an extreme reluctance for them to even digest the evidence. Was that your feel?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, like his boss had pretty much told him to be there and to like hear what we had, and he didn't even want to, entertain it at the time. And then I think after he heard it, his eyes were kind of opening a little bit. But I got the feeling like McCarthy was trying to put a squash on any actual investigation of January 6th, and he wanted to avoid it. Now that week, like you had set up a meeting with the congressman, but at the time, like I didn't have permission to go to Washington without judicial approval. And so I had to get approval to go there. And so I requested to sit in and review the CCTV terminals, which they had just opened up to defendants to access. And I did get approval, which allowed me to make that trip. And part of the reason I was there was to look at what video they had, because we had a production in our discovery of CCTV, but we knew it wasn't like the complete video. And so I went and I kind of audited like what they had. And the funny thing is, like, there were cameras that we had produced in discovery that had not been produced in, or that were not in their CCTV terminal. And I brought that up to Elliot and them like, hey, you guys are missing cameras, and there are cameras on the map that are not here. Like, and then you've got like chunks of time in different cameras, like in the middle of the afternoon, you got a little over 2 hours from a lot of different cameras at the Capitol that have no footage. And then they were missing video from the Library of Congress, which is also Capitol Police, right across the street. And there were just a lot of cameras that they were missing, or they were missing like sections of time in. And I pointed them out to it, and that should have been a huge red flag to them, but they didn't want to talk about it. Elliot didn't want to talk about it at all. And we've never really gotten complete answers on why. And of course, they promised to release everything. And to Mike Johnson's credit, he did release a lot of footage, which has been very useful. But there are still a lot of cameras and a lot of times that have not been released by Congress. And Speaker Johnson claims that he can't release it because of security concerns. But if you look at the statute on how they handle security information, you can only like withhold it if, there's a protectee in the footage, which would be like maybe Vice President Mike Pence. So you could withhold the footage of him being moved around the building. Or if you have like an agency operation, if it would give away like agency tactics or something like that. So I think a lot of that footage does show undercover operations at the Capitol. Republicans know about it. They don't want to talk about it, which to me, again, that's another pretty big scandal, but we'll see what Loudermilk ends up giving us,
Yeah. So you and I had, in some ways, we had a similar journey. We were both pursuing graduate level degrees. You were getting your PhD. I had just finished my law school, and my degree was withheld because of my arrest. And then you were slowed down as well now. And I am happy to announce that I did get my degree back. It took a fight, and so I got my degree 4 years after I completed it. And so now you are on the road to getting your PhD as well. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I was a PhD student at K-State when January 6th happened. I like in the months after I finished my required coursework, but I kind of put on hold completing the degree because, I had to fight my case, right? So that was the priority. It pretty much took over my life. But earlier in the year, I completed my preliminary exams, which made me a PhD candidate. And now I'm in the phase where I'm working on my dissertation. So as soon as I finish the dissertation, then I'll graduate and have the PhD. But yeah, congratulations to you on finally getting your law degree, which you earned and which they were unrightly withholding from you for a long time.
Hey, thanks for that. So, hey, I think it's kind of funny. So, and not in a painful sense that, so it's, you have a background, you've worked for the federal government before, are employed by the federal government now, and you are actually one of the furloughed workers that is being held back from work due to the government shutdown.
Yeah. So first, to be clear, like, I'm not speaking on behalf of the government in this interview. I'm doing it on my own time. I worked for the National Park Service for many years back in the day, at Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon and Glacier. And, one of the places I worked was Nicodemus National Historic Site, which is a historic all-black pioneer town here in Kansas. And so to me, it was crazy that the DOJ was calling us white supremacist when, I had worked to like advance Black history, right, for the federal government. But I did get a seasonal job with the National Park Service again this year, trying to survive because, quite frankly, as a January 6th defendant, it's very difficult to find any job. Working for the federal government wasn't my first choice, but I applied for it and I got it. And the background check took a little longer than it has ever taken before, but eventually I started work, and I'm not really doing anything all that special for them. I'm doing manual labor, but I'm also furloughed right now. And again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the government in this interview. And under my rights as a citizen, I have the ability to continue exercising First Amendment rights on my own time, just as long as I don't violate the Hatch Act. And so I do have to make clear that I'm not doing this interview on behalf of the government. And after my season is up, I don't know what'll be after that, but I am currently a national park employee.
Whatever happened with your case? I know that they were trying, the government, even after the case concluded, the pardons, everything, the government came back and was fighting to retrieve some of the evidence that you had. And we were really upset that the DOJ was continuing its, I guess, let's call it egregious actions in pursuit of trying to further quell the type of information that you've been bringing forward. So what happened, and what is this current state of that?
Yeah. So in 2024, I mean, I was pissing the government off quite a bit in the motions that I was filing and winning many of them. But they filed a cross motion on me to require me to return any discovery, any sensitive discovery after the conclusion of the case, right? So in every January 6th case, they established a protective order. The judge would have a protective order which outlined what you can and can't do with the discovery. And in my case, they wanted to change the parameters of that to make me return discovery. Nobody else has that requirement. And the judge granted it for them. And then on inauguration day, I was fortunate enough to get to travel to Washington, and I was at the inaugural ball celebrating, and I ran into Ed Martin, and he told me I could keep my discovery. Like, he's the one who brought it up. And so he just said, file a motion and, it'll be all good. And so I filed a motion on it saying, hey, Ed Martin has given me permission to keep my discovery. And then the next thing I know, the government is opposing me on that motion and saying that Ed Martin never let me do that. So I'm not real happy with Ed about that. He did kind of stab me in the back. And I'm, still fighting that battle right now, unfortunately. Like, why do I have to fight the Trump DOJ on that? And why do they want me to return the discovery, which is not only, a record of my case, but, a lot of the work that I did. So I am fighting that. I filed a notice of appeal, and we'll see where it goes from here. But yeah, the battle is still going with the Trump DOJ, unfortunately.
So, I love your Twitter feed. It's not only funny and humorous, but it's a nice mix of humor, and it's very informative as well. Where can people find you on Twitter?
My Twitter handle is @FreeStateWill, and I don't know. I go on whatever rants. You find it funny, which I'm glad. I don't know. Like, lately, I maybe don't post as much original January 6th content as I did like while the case was pending, and I was trying to make people aware. But there are still kind of lingering issues related to January 6th that we're trying to get taken care of, and I try to commentate on that here and there. But yeah, follow me on Twitter if you're out there, and feel free to ask any questions if you have them.
Hey, Will, brother, you are a brother in arms, and I care greatly for you. You are, I really feel like you are a true American hero. Thank you for all the work you've done, and thank you for coming on, man. And let's touch base again during this January 6th committee, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that as it progresses.
Yeah, happy to do that, and pleasure to join you today, Brady.
Thank you, Will.